Hey, happy Friday. This week, Google had a pretty rough time when it comes to their AI ambitions. OnePlus made a surprisingly good comeback, and the EU started forcing more competition on iPhones. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video was sponsored by Ground News. Okay, this week we start the brief with the first developer preview of Android 14, which dropped not long ago. The upcoming release is internally codenamed Upside Down Cake, and while this is an early build, we already know that it will include even better support for large screens and foldables. It'll make it easier to find and delete carrier-installed bloatware, and it will allow for the cloning of apps to use 2 accounts at once and more. Then, new reports this week claim that Apple is considering to build an Ultra version of their iPhone that would be even more pro than the Pro, I guess. And I really liked this mock-up of what it might look like based on the Apple Watch Ultra. And over at Twitter, one report said that only 290,000 global subscribers are paying for Twitter Blue 2 months after its launch. That's about 0.1% of monthly active users, and according to our own quick maths, that is at most $7 million a quarter. For context, Twitter had about $1 billion a quarter in advertising revenue before Elon took over, of which the company has lost about 40%, so things have definitely not worked out for them so far. Then in China, propaganda videos started appearing on a fictitious news outlet called Wolf News, with stories read by deepfaked news anchors. One of the reports said that the tech comes out of a London-based AI startup called Synthesia, so everything is going just great. And then here's a fun chart for you. Just Apple's services revenue alone, which hit more than $78 billion in 2022, is now more than the revenues of entire giants like Intel and Boeing, or more than, say, McDonald's and Coca-Cola combined. Just Apple's services alone. No wonder they don't like giving up their 30% cuts from the App Store. And also this week we saw that Bing is facing a lot of interesting ethical dilemmas now that it has its own AI tools built in, and we'll talk about those and more in detail in my podcast, The Friday Chill Out, which you can watch or listen to right now on Nebula, or you can get the audio version a day later if you don't have Nebula. Links to both are down in the description. Okay, that's it for the brief, and for my first story of the week, we're gonna be talking about some pretty spicy new AI drama. So this week, while Microsoft showed off an actual working version of basically ChatGPT 4 in Bing, which you can now sign up for with the link in the description, and while CEO Satya Nadella went on a press tour saying that they actively want to challenge Google now and they want the world to see that they can, quote, make them dance, Google was actually trying to rush out a response and they got into panic mode, which really ended up showing that the company very much was taken by surprise. First, Google put out a blog post announcing Bard, basically its own version of ChatGPT, that will be coming out alongside search in a few weeks. Unfortunately, the blog post that announced prominently featured the service incorrectly answering a question about the James Webb Telescope, where Bard just made up a wrong fact about it being the first to find planets outside of our solar system. Oops. And also this week, Google held a big and probably rushed AI event in Paris, but instead of a victory parade, the event went pretty poorly too. Very few products that Google talked about were actually made available for the public, and the live demo just completely failed. Not because the product failed, but because apparently somebody lost a phone that had the software with the demo on it, creating this kind of weird moment.
We are missing the phone. We will have to. We have no. Okay, we're gonna move on. We can't find the phone. Sorry.
Now, a mistake in a demo and a marketing material isn't like the end of the world, but Wall Street doesn't seem to be confident in Google's AI future as their stock plummeted pretty heavily, down about 8.5%, wiping out more than $100 billion in market cap after the event, while Microsoft saw their stock price rising. The new AI tools are also way more expensive to run than just serving up regular search results, while it's also unclear how anyone would be able to include proper advertising into these results, so search as a business might just get fundamentally worse overall, and Google might lose out even if Bing does not win in the end. One model from a big US bank suggests that if 50% of Google's search queries require a 50-word response, that will now cost an extra $6 billion on a short time frame. Also, there's a lot of ethical questions floating around, with website owners anxiously waiting to see if search engines will stop giving them traffic if they answer people's questions instead of showing them search results. This is a classic innovator's dilemma. This new tech has the potential to blow up the search business as we know it, and therefore Google is really reluctant to move forward with it, whereas other companies, like Microsoft for example, kind of don't care. They're okay with maybe half as big a market in terms of revenue if they can capture it all for themselves, because for them, that's still additional revenue, not shrinking revenue. According to Satya, from now on, the gross margin of search is going to drop forever, but they don't care because even with that drop, for every 1 point share in search advertising market, it's a $2 billion revenue opportunity for their advertising business. Huge. So yeah, Google might still win the AI war. After all, they were one of its original pioneers, so they have real chances at that. But even if that happens, they might cut their own business in half, and there's basically only bad choices on the table for them. Okay, my second story of the week is going to be OnePlus announcing a ton of new stuff, and in a way that kind of makes it seem like they're back as a company that you and I, the tech enthusiasts, might actually care about again. Exciting. So first, there are the phones. There's a OnePlus 11 globally and a OnePlus 11R in India. And the global version has great flagship specs, a pretty aggressive price point of $699, and it even got its alert slider back. So other than ColorOS, this is kind of the same OnePlus formula that we're used to from the past. It even has the same drawbacks, like no wireless charging, weak waterproofing, and good but not great cameras, all for a lower price. And while ColorOS might not be everyone's favorite, the company has committed to 4 years of Android updates plus 5 years of security patches, matching Samsung's excellent support level, so overall, I think that's pretty good. Then, beside the phone, there's also now a OnePlus Pad for global markets, and while we don't have an exact price yet, it should be an 11.6-inch tablet with a 144Hz display and a MediaTek Dimensity 9000 chipset, plus the company also announced that it wants to build a whole ecosystem of devices now, starting with their new earbuds, a TV, a new mechanical keyboard, and even hinting at a concept phone in the next few weeks at MWC, as well as a foldable phone soon too. It's obviously too early to tell, but this does feel like kind of a U-turn, like a return to their original formula a little bit, which is exciting. Okay, my third story of the week is going to be how the EU might force some real competition onto iPhones for their web browsers. So for the longest time, all web browsers on iPhones, and also iPads by the way, had to use WebKit, the same browser engine as Safari, essentially making the likes of Google Chrome and Firefox on iOS act as kind of skins of Safari. This has made iOS a really stifled environment, and Apple tends to let Safari get all the latest optimizations before other browsers get those, so this is also just fundamentally unfair. But that may be changing this week because 2 stories this week reported that browser companies are preparing versions of their apps that don't use WebKit. Google has begun work on a Blink-based version of Chrome for iOS, while Mozilla is apparently working on a new version of Firefox that uses their own Gecko rendering engine. And if all of this goes through, we can probably thank an upcoming piece of legislation from the EU called the Digital Markets Act, which enforces this kind of competition. The question is whether Apple would let competing rendering engines into the App Store outside of the EU as well, but I guess that just like with USB-C, it might not make sense for them to have 2 different rule sets for different parts of the world, and so we might see true browser competition on iOS any day now. Pretty cool. Now for each story that I cover on the Friday Checkout, I have to make sure that I do a lot of research and represent them accurately. And one tool that I found incredibly useful for this is Ground News. Ground News is a website and an app that aggregates news from around the world, but instead of just listing articles, it also contextualizes them with really helpful data. You get many sources for each news story, so you can compare and choose between them, and you can also get an idea for whether a story is covered more on one side of the political spectrum or the other. All the extra info that you get is super useful for any story, but especially for politically charged ones like this deepfake news anchor one that we mentioned before. On Ground News, I can quickly compare coverage from multiple sources. I can see how factual various news outlets have been in the past before I actually click on them, and with my premium subscription, I can even see who funds each of these news organizations. A subscription also gets you access to My News Bias, a personal dashboard that shows you how much news you're reading and where it is all coming from. They even have a dedicated blind spot section that shows you news stories that were mostly covered by only one side of the political spectrum, and you can of course also customize your feed so you see more news from a specific region or a topic that you care about the most. Go to ground.news/Friday Checkout or click on the link in the description to sign up for a free trial of a premium subscription. Alright, happy news hunting, and I'll see you next Friday.